Coming up next in This Week in Computer Hardware, Intel or AMD, you're going to be getting a GPU too. Stackable Cases, Western Digital's new 4TB RAID drives, 3 new laptops from Asus, massive thumb drives, and some help with bent CPU pins. All this and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 233, recorded September 5th, 2013. APUs, people, all the way down.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by ProXPN. ProXPN is a virtual private network that allows you to use the internet the way it should be, anonymous and unfiltered. For 20% off your new account, go to proxpn.com/twit and use the code TWITCH.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the best, most useful, and most important news in hardware, whether it be PC, Macintosh, Android, iOS, and yes, occasionally even obscure cell phone brands. Exciting week this week, and not just because it's just been revealed that the NSA has backdoors to everything. This is a hardware show, and we're not going to get too depressed about that. Mr. Ryan Trout, do you feel naked and exposed, or do you feel that the NSA's backdoor capabilities have been...
That's a little bit too much innuendo for my take, so I'm just going to go with I feel great.
Feel great.
I just always figured that they were always spying on me all the time, so I've lived my life accordingly, I guess. I don't know.
Clean living and face-to-face communications in open spaces with lots of noise. That's why Ryan goes to the ball, people.
That's right. I guess I'll move to Canada. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure we're tapped into their communications too, but...
Okay. Fine.
Let's talk about exciting and important news, and actually is germane to the show. The Ivy Bridge E, the Core i7-4960X. Should we all sell our processors immediately and move to Intel's latest and greatest super chip?
I would say probably not. We've known Ivy Bridge E. We need to specify here, was coming for a while. Ivy Bridge E, for people who maybe don't know, the E kind of stands for extra or enterprise or extended. I really have no idea. It's a designator to let you know that this is not your standard mainstream consumer part. It's kind of a workstation, server class, super high-end enthusiast part. Sandy Bridge E came out almost 18 months, 2 years ago, maybe more than that.
Sounds about
Something
right.
like that. I think it's almost been 2 years. And the idea is that took Sandy Bridge architecture, which was a quad-core hyper-threaded part, and they bumped it up a little bit. So you could buy a 6-core, 12-threaded part with up to, you could get 4 channels of DDR3 memory, and it didn't have integrated graphics. It was just faster, better part, more expensive. It was in a slightly different platform. Ivy Bridge E is the same idea. They took the Ivy Bridge architecture, took from quad-core to 6-core, and they didn't really mess with the frequencies a whole lot, but you are, again, at your quad-channel DDR3 memory controller. You have hyper-threading, you have turbo boost, all the processors are unlocked for overclocking, and up to 15 megs of Intel shared L3 cache, which is nice. Now, the processor, let's get this part out of the way. The processor is the new fastest processor, but kind of by default. If we compare it against the newest Haswell generation, like the 4770K, it's faster than a quad-core Haswell because it has 50% more cores and threads. So it's able to outperform those processors pretty easily in multi-threaded software applications and workloads. Where it doesn't outperform it is in single-threaded workloads. There are a couple of benchmarks that you can look at on the Cinebench page. In particular, the single-threaded result there will show you that Ivy Bridge E is slower than Haswell, and it's obviously right on par with Ivy Bridge in terms of single-threaded performance. And what makes it interesting is when Sandy Bridge E came out on the market, the current top architecture from Intel was Sandy Bridge. So you were taking the current top architecture, giving you more processing cores, more memory channels, more PCI Express lanes, more flexibility. Boom! It was an easier sell to the enthusiast. The problem with Ivy Bridge E's release is that Haswell has been released, right? Haswell is the architecture after Ivy Bridge. So now we are not just comparing Ivy Bridge E to Ivy Bridge. We're comparing Ivy Bridge E to Haswell. And it's not as easy of a sell as it was a couple of years ago for Sandy Bridge E. It still has its advantages with the multi-core side. And then the platform, one nice thing is the platform doesn't change. So you're still using the Intel X79 chipset. You'll have to, if you have an existing motherboard, you'll have to get a BIOS update, firmware update for that. But an Ivy Bridge E should work out of the box. And one of the main benefits of Ivy Bridge E is the platform of PCI Express lanes. So you get 40 lanes of PCI Express 3.0 out of Ivy Bridge E, while you only get 16 lanes out of Haswell and Ivy Bridge and Sandy Bridge. So that's kind of like the biggest draw, in my opinion, is like if you are one of those people that I'm going to go three-way SLI or three-way Crossfire, then this is going to give you the most native lanes of PCI Express without going through any bridge chips, without having to worry about by-4 lanes or anything like that. But it has some deficiencies on the platform side too. There's no native USB 3.0. Most of the motherboards will have USB 3 added on through secondary controllers, and there's only two channels of native SATA 6G connectivity on it, whereas Haswell's chipset has 6 channels of SATA 6G support. So it's kind of this weird mixed bag of legacy, problems that have been around for 2 years, because the platform is identical to what Sandy Bridge E was essentially. And, you're getting more performance in these particular workloads that need it, that are heavily threaded workloads. And it's an expensive part. So like we reviewed the Core i7-4960X, which is the highest end part. It's $990. The step down from that is the 4930K, which is still fully unlocked. It's still 6 cores. It's like 100 megahertz less on the top turbo speed is all. And it drops from $990 to $555. So that's a significant price reduction, while still getting 6 cores, and it's still an unlocked processor. You can do your overclocking, and it's not that big a deal. Then they have the one below that, which is the 4820K, which is a quad core part, which is kind of the most perplexing option for me, because if you're going to buy a quad core Intel processor, I would get the Haswell quad core Intel processor. You may be able to make the argument that, hey, I want the 40 lanes of PCI Express because I want to use SLI graphics and I want a PCI Express SSD or something like that. And like, okay, and you want the lowest cost processor that will enable that. That's the 4820. But I think if we're talking about niche markets, that's even getting more into the smaller and smaller markets of that as well. So it's, I've already fielded some emails in the last couple of days of people who, hey, I was waiting on Ivy Bridge E. What should I do now? It's all dependent on what your particular workloads are and which particular goals are for your system. It's not a slam dunk in terms of best possible system ever, as Sandy Bridge E was.
So in radically different news, AMD's processor shift, the future really is Fusion. Josh wrote this up at PCPer.com. Retiring the workhorses, there is an inevitable shift coming. Honestly, this has been quite obvious for some time, but it has just taken AMD a bit longer to get here than many have expected. Some years back, we saw AMD release their new motto, "The future is Fusion." While many thought it somewhat interesting and trite, it actually foreshadowed the massive shift from monolithic CPU cores to APUs. Right now, AMD APUs are doing okay in desktops and are gaining traction in mobile applications. What most people do not realize is that AMD will be going all APU all the time in the very near future. So I don't see this as being a particular shock, although I think it may be weird, the idea that I mean, does AMD just not, I mean, we knew a year ago, 2 years ago. It bleeds in the memory when AMD basically said outright that they were no longer going to compete or try to compete with Intel for the top of the market because they didn't have the engineering. They weren't able to scale the engineering to the point where they'd be able to compete with the top of the line Core i7s. Yep. At least not at the price point. APUs obviously going to be a huge part of their distribution or their market share, or well, I should say their internal part supply, given that that's going to be the processor at the core of the Xbox One and the PlayStation. Are you worried? I mean, are you worried about the end of AM3, about the traditional AMD desktop processors?
I don't really know. So it's, you know, if you think about it, Intel has already started down this road in one respect, right? We just talked about Ivy Bridge E, which is a super high-end enthusiast platform that doesn't have integrated graphics. But what I'm going to say is, in the mainstream side, in that 400 and below price range of processors, Intel's already done this, right? Every processor that they sell has integrated graphics on it. Ivy Bridge, Haswell, Sandy Bridge, they all had integrated graphics on it, with a rogue few parts that were the same die with that fused off, right? And they were just trying to save some chips that they could still sell. And, you know, Josh wrote this editorial basically kind of saying, if you take a look at what AMD has done on the AM3 side of things, the FX processor side of things, if you see what they've done on the Opteron side of things, they haven't progressed the platforms at all. Chipsets that used to be well ahead of what Intel's chipsets had have now come even or fallen behind in terms of feature sets. And you know, they haven't done anything updating those processor lines either, right? We saw the FX 9590 release, which is really just that Vishera part overclocked with a huge TDP power draw on it. And he basically came to the conclusion that he doesn't think that AMD is going to go back down that road. There are some comments on our story on the website where they talk about, hey, you know, these quotes from AMD guys saying we're going to get back into the high-performance CPU core market. And I do believe that they're going to make improvements there, and they need to make dramatic improvements there. But I still think that's going to be coupled onto an APU. And that's not bad, right? And that's kind of his summation at the end of this editorial, is that AMD is, they're refocusing what they're doing in order to address areas that they think they have an advantage in. And the APU is that advantage. The problem that AMD has still, since they announced you know, the idea of an APU and heterogeneous computing and fusion, is the software is not catching up as fast as they would like. They don't have those flagship, you know, pieces of software that everybody uses that are way faster because of heterogeneous computing and the combined CPU GPU resources that are available on these APUs. And you know, what AMD tries to do is, can we get that leap first before Intel does? Whereas Intel says, we think we can control the market enough until that software is there where we are caught up in that area. So, you know, I think the future of AMD is in APUs. I think, you know, Josh lays out a pretty coherent plan as to why he thinks that's the case and why it's not a bad thing either. You can still have completely capable high-performance CPU cores on a chip that also has graphics on it. I mean, Haswell is that. It's pretty decent graphics, and it's a great processor core. And the graphics don't really hold it back. If you're not using the graphics, the processors are still great. And if AMD spends the engineering resources, the money, and the time on it, they can do that exact same thing. It's just they need to actually do it.
It's funny. It's almost starting to seem like, you know, we talk about checkbox features on HD Nation a lot. Somebody's like, well, can I get a monitor without this or that or the set-top box features? And it's like, well, yeah, like Seiki, and there's a couple other, you know, more high-end brands that you know, don't deliver a lot of additional features on HD TVs, or you could buy a projector. But the reality is for processors, having serious GPU horsepower on board is now a checkbox feature. You're going to get it whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I think that, I think that's fair. And even in the server world, you know, they're talking about, you know, the Opteron that used to be their cash cow was when K6 was huge and K7 was huge, or K7, not K6, when K7 was huge and all that stuff, the Opteron was really what sold them. There was high margins, they could sell a lot, and they've kind of scaled back from there. And they've been trying desperately just to keep that one foot in the door of the server world. And their announcements and their discussions about, hey, we're going to integrate some ARM technologies into our servers, is they're moving more towards the idea of the micro server as opposed to the giant, huge, 16 core behemoth processors and like 4-socket designs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them and where they try to address their resources. They're not as big a company as Intel. They can't address as many areas as Intel. They really need to focus on where they have an advantage and take advantage of it, to use that word too many times.
No, it's I think it's an appropriate use of advantage and taking advantage of it. Cooler Master unveils the half stacker series of PAX Prime 2013. PAX Prime, the annual Seattle-based gaming exposition from the people behind Penny Arcade, primarily known for computer games, especially indie games. Tim Berry caught up with the new Cooler Master half stacker series, which was announced at PAX Prime 2013, which, well, it's funny, pull that graphic up again, because it's interesting, because there's a 915F, which is a front-mounted power supply unit, the 915R, which is a rear-mounted power supply unit. Then there's the half-stacker 935. And in the picture up on PCPro.com that sort of shows all these stacked up, is the reason they call it the stacker series is because they're designed to stack, kids. This is wild, weird stuff. That the one that's outlined on the right is, if you can't read the type there, it says your customized configurations. And it's the idea that the 935, there you go, that's the customized configuration. To the left of that, the 935 is essentially 2 cases stacked, the full tower 925F and the mini ITX half 915R. It's interesting that the idea that you are going to be able to play around with a whole lot of storage and power capability inside of these boxes. There's part of me that's like, this is awesome. And there's part of me like, couldn't they put more 5¼ inch drives on the front of them? Because the Rip Monster needs a new home.
we have an email for you later in the show that will help you address the Rip Monster. We talked about this last night, and our concern was, what would you use this for? Like,
I have no idea. If you wanted to build a NAS and stack it on top of your gaming PC or your media PC,
I guess I like the idea of putting a whole bunch of radiators in the top of one, and then there's holes in the floor and the top of the cases so that you can just feed the tubes down that you need, cycle that loop, and it's pretty clean looking. I also decided that usually at QuakeCon they have these, like in the BYOC, they have these stacking contests where people will take cans of soda and they'll put pizza boxes on top of it, and then they'll put more cans of soda, put pizza box, and they always try to out each other on towers. And I want to see that done with Cooler Master cases. It's a little bit more dangerous, perhaps.
Or exciting. Danger, excitement, tension. This is all good things. Well, it's funny because, like, I got to say, it's one of possibly my favorite press release for a case, because it's Cooler Master, a leading creator, innovator, and manufacturer of desktop components and more, today officially unveils to the world the first stackable mid-tower, the half stacker series. This evolutionary computer case is the first of its kind to provide new levels of modularity, expandability, and creativity for system builders around the world. And I'm going to scroll down. Stack up, stack on, half stacker, built for the tinkerer, DIY builder, modern, newbie, multi-PC household, and you. More than a collection of cases, it's the freedom to configure a single PC or multiple PC setups in innumerable ways. Be it water-cooled, air-cooled, workstation server, extreme gaming setup, or the first PC you have ever built, Half Stacker has a setup to suit you. And I can't decide if that's because they feel it's infinitely flexible or they have, as Ryan suggested, no idea who they're going to sell it to. Standalone cases that stand out on their own merit while being stackable with other models in the series for expanded functionality. And rail system inspired by military Picatinny rail to enable the attachment removal of each stackable piece in 2 easy and secure steps. Sure. Now I want to because I can actually see places where I've done things where this would actually work really well, where basically like I had a NAS box and a computer box and they're in the same closet. So my media server and my NAS box, my DIY NAS box could be sort of living in the same environment. If we have the ability to put like 9 hard drives inside of the Stacker 915F, that would be so killer. Coolermaster-usa.com/microsite/half stacker. if you want all the information on that. And brace yourselves because it's going to take a little while to download. Western Digital Red 4 terabyte. Oh, well, it's loading fast for you, isn't it, Burke, in the studio there? Look at that, kids. Come on, that's excitement.
Hey, good web page design is part of the deal, right?
No, I think it's cool. Yeah, okay, so I'm apparently a really serious case nerd. I don't think there's ever been any question about that.
No, not at all.
Not me. No. Yeah, I just want to get inside one of those and see how many drives I can stuff inside of it. Because, that's the way I roll. Yes, sir.
If you need more, just add more at the bottom. Stack another one on there. Right?
And then the pizza cases and the soda cans and the pizza cases and the soda cans and then more stackers. Nice. Speaking of stackers and storing all the stuff, Western Digital Red 3.5-inch, 4 terabyte, and 2.5-inch, 1 terabyte NAS hard disk drives, full review. Alan Malventano up on PCPro.com. The short version of this, if you go to the last page, is it's a gold award from PC Perspective. Alan wants you to have proper drives inside your NAS. Proper means the red drives because their ability to deal with NASs behaving like NASs. Not to sound ridiculous. The 1 terabyte, 2.5-inch drive is for stuff like Drobo's Mini, which you may or may have not ever seen, but it's essentially there's actually a whole category of devices out there that are essentially stuffing multiple 2.5-inch drives inside of a case, partially because they're small. They're very portable, which if you've ever edited 42 gigabytes of video at CES starts to sound really, really attractive. Yep. But if you've never heard about some of the issues with time-limited error recovery, or TLER for short, I highly suggest you read the article. It's an interesting observation on why some hard drives die in NAS situations and why the Red series exists. Gold award for PC Perspective. It is a big fat honkin' drive. And it's nice to see drive prices coming down because the Reds are usually a little more pricey than the other drives. So they start at $80 for a 1 terabyte drive. Pardon me. The 3 terabyte drive is $146.43 on Amazon, and the 4 terabyte drive is selling for a great big healthy $219.99. And to put that into perspective, you're looking at it's about a $20 VIG for the 3 terabyte drive, and about a $10 to $20 VIG for the green 2 terabyte drive. If you are shopping around and looking for the best deal. If you don't want to listen to Alan, you want to risk your data integrity in your NAS, you can go with the green. And they are a smidge less expensive.
Yeah.
So, huge USB 3.0 flash drives. These things are getting kind of stupid big. And I say that because I desperately want one. Oh my goodness, I want one of these so bad. 64, 128, and 256 gigabyte flash drives from Voyager, Corsair's Voyager line. These are huge, dude.
We're talking about capacity, not physical size.
Yes, if you scroll down to the next picture, Burke, you'll see the keychain attached to one of these. And trust me, it is not a giant sort of, dog collar size key ring. This is a normal human size key ring. But so
the Flash Voyager GS goes up to 256 gigs for $250. So it's not a horrible price. It's not the best solid state price we've ever seen. But they're also quoting performance of 285 megs per second read and 180 megs per second writes. So pretty good speeds through USB 3.0 connection at 256 gigs. So that's a lot. Now the other ones, they don't really mention performance. So which means it's going to be slower than that. But I really like the design of that Voyager Mini with the keyring on it. Looks like it would be really handy to have. And that does go up to 64 gigs. And then the lower end one goes up to 128 gigs for $90. So again, they don't mention performance on the other two models, but they're still USB 3, so they're going to be better than they would be otherwise.
Right.
Which is nice.
I just like the idea of basically filling your hard drive in a second. Oh, wait, that performance will be gated by the performance on the system you're transferring from, but still.
Correct.
I really like Thunderbolt and USB 3.0, at least when I'm not paying for Thunderbolt cables.
The SSD on my laptop that I'm using is only 180 gigs or 250 gigs. So this flash drive is, I could copy my entire hard drive, my entire SSD in my laptop to my flash drive.
Oh my goodness. I like it. I want one. I don't know whether or not I want King Spec's new 1 terabyte PCI Express SSD. This thing's crazy. It's 8 mSATA SSDs in a RAID configuration on a PCI Express card. Okay, I probably want it also. I can't afford it. I have no justification for it, but I've always been a enthusiast, to use a naughty word.
Well, maybe you can take some consolation in the fact that Alan would not recommend you buy this.
Oh, good.
Even though it performs very well, this website tested it and they were talking about 2.5 gigs per second on 4K reads, kind of sequential, and 1.6 gigs writes. The chances are that all of these mSATA SSDs are in some kind of RAID 0 array.
Oh, well, that sounds stable.
Which is never a great idea. And I think he said there are 8 controllers on this. Is that right? There are 8 different SATA controllers. Yeah, 8 6 gigabit per second mSATA slots. So you have 8 potential fail points on it.
So it's an LSI RAID controller, 8 6 gigabit per second mSATA slots, and you're looking at paying between $2,000 and $3,000, depending whether you roll with the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte version.
Yeah,
that's a lot of 256 gigabyte mSATA SSDs to stuff on a.
It's impressive to see. Like this is like okay, somebody had to make this. That's cool to see, but I don't know exactly. Like if you're the kind of person that needs 2.5 gigs per second of read speeds or 1.6 of writes, you're probably a fairly high-end enterprise market, and you probably want something that's going to be a little bit more danger-proof, fail-proof than 8 controllers behind a SATA RAID array. So
we should also point out that Alan said that the 4K random I/O offered by the drive is actually less than some single-drive SATA SSDs on the market, and that the LSI RAID controller is a, quote, major bottleneck for SSD-level random access. So, I don't know. Big honkin' video projects?
Yeah, I don't know.
Buy like 5.
Even for that, get a handful of SSDs, put them in a RAID array, and be done with it. I mean, we have some pretty extensive video demands here when we do our capturing at 488 megs a second. Now is what we're up to for graphics testing, and that's pretty high-end stuff. And we're okay with our Thunderbolt external RAID array, or an internal SATA RAID 0 array works fine. So
I'm just thinking you could build a monster RAID 5 system out of Samsung Evo 8, or excuse me, Samsung 840s, with $2,000 worth of Samsung 840s and a RAID controller.
Less money,
yeah.
You're right. You're right. So at IFA, which I still don't know what it stands for, Asus announced a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know if you saw this one. This was the one that was, there's a couple of things we'll mention real briefly, but I wanted to talk to this one specifically. This is the Asus Transformer Book Trio. And it's a convertible tablet, which means the tablet detaches from the keyboard base. And the first trick is that in the tablet part of it is an Atom Z2760 SoC. So that's a Clover Trail part, and it runs Android. The base of it holds a Core i5 or Core i7 Haswell ultra low voltage, desktop system, and it runs Windows 8. So what happens is when this is docked in the keyboard, there's actually a button on the keyboard that lets you switch between Android and Windows 8 on the fly. It like instantly, they say. And they share data through the 64 up to 64 gigs of flash on the tablet. So that's kind of interesting, right? So now, you've got this kind of combo device. But here, this is my favorite part, is if you detach it. Okay, now you detach it. You take the screen. It's a tablet. It's running Android. You can't run Windows on it. It doesn't have. It's got. I guess technically you could, but it's running Android. So now you have this base station. So what do you do with it? Well, if you hook up an external display through the mini DisplayPort or micro HDMI, you can use it as a computer, as
Oh,
a
that's
desktop.
cool. I like
And,
that.
you access all of that hardware, your hard drive is in there, all that data is still in that base station. And I thought, how has nobody thought of that before? It's kind of interesting.
Well, there's some other similar designs, but the
Yeah.
Android tablety version of it,
Okay.
I think, is a version of it.
So,
That I
their
have
claim
heard.
is you can have two people in two different places using the Transformer Book Trio at the same time. Now,
Right.
what exactly are the use cases for this? Like, what environments is this good? Like, is it something where, your kid's bugging you, so you take off the top of your laptop and give it to him so he can play Android games, and off he goes, and now you plug in your monitor, and now you have a system there. One idea that we came up with last night was if this has support for wireless display technologies,
Uh-huh.
then it becomes pretty interesting. Now, you can sit at the TV and use WiDi or something and wirelessly use that as a display and sit there with this on your lap. It's a keyboard and a touchpad, and now you can do some computing on it that way.
How many minutes into the conversation was it before you came up with that use scenario?
It was pretty far into the conversation.
It's cool. It's interesting. I'm a little scared about what the actual cost is going to be. That looks like a really expensive piece of hardware. Or
Correct.
maybe it won't be.
You're doubling up the amount of processors you have. Obviously, the Atom
Right.
Z2760 is less expensive than the Haswell parts. They don't
Right.
mention pricing. They don't mention availability. They don't mention the wireless display
Right.
option, which I would think they would if it were in there. But it's just a neat idea. Like,
It is. And it's probably only
Let's
like a
see.
$200 VIG because you can build a freaking Android tablet for $200 now. I
Yep.
mean, a nice Android tablet. So,
Yep.
wow.
Yeah. Yep, that's the Transformer Book Trio. The other ones, what are the other ones we had here?
The Zen books.
Actually, yeah, I'm not gonna try to pronounce that. Burke. He looked up what
Oh, I
IFA
did.
stood for. Oh, you did. Okay.
Internationale Funkausstellung Berlin. It's essentially the Berlin radio show. One of the
Okay.
oldest industrial exhibitions in Germany between 1924. It goes on. It's essentially the German CES.
Gotcha.
So
They announced some other things. Maybe the Zen books are interesting. The
They're pretty.
X301 and X302. So these are their
really
Ultrabook,
pretty.
Haswell powered. One of
Mhm.
them has a screen up to 2560 by 1440. And
Nice.
a 13-inch screen with Iris Pro graphics, 802.11 AC, micro HDMI 1.4, USB 3.0.
Mhm.
These are really nice looking machines. And if you look at the picture of it, I don't know if you saw the other Zen books before where they had this kind of brushed metal finish on the back. And it kind of has this cool spiral pattern to it.
Yeah.
Well, the issue was they got scratched fairly easily. So what they did with this iteration is they put a layer of Corning Gorilla Glass on top of the metal finish
Oh, wow.
that is extremely durable and resists scratches and all that kind of stuff. So the idea is now it keeps that finish and it looks nice the whole time. I don't know how much that will add to the weight, but it shouldn't be too dramatic. I think they're talking 1.38 kilograms for the X301 and 1.5 kilograms for the X302. Again, no pricing or availability, but with IDF coming up this week, I'll be sure to bug them. 2560 by 1440 and a 13-inch screen with 802.11 AC, USB 3.0. Let's assume pretty good battery life because it's a Haswell machine. I like that.
That's going on the short list. Asus,
Yeah,
Asus's build quality has been really nice.
Yep.
I like it.
I would like to. I want to get my hands on one of these this week, and maybe I'll just steal it. I don't know. We'll talk.
I heard nothing. I know nothing. We have one more laptop before we go from IFA.
This is the
Asus.
X102BA. It's like the exact polar opposite of that Haswell notebook we just talked about. It's powered by an AMD Tamash dual core APU. It's low. It's going to be. They don't mention price, but it's going to be really low cost, probably in the 300 to 400 range. It's Windows 8. It's a 10.1 inch screen, 1366 by 768 resolution, so fairly low resolution. 2 or 4 gigs of memory, 802.11n. It's a low cost lower performance, but should still be pretty good, right? So we talked about Tamash and Kabini and those low power AMD SoCs to kind of compete in this small form factor, ultra portables, and maybe even tablet designs. And it's you know, we're eager to see if it actually holds up to it. So
It's interesting.
there's a quad core option too that they chose not to use in this, so it'll be interesting to see why. I don't know.
Well, it's funny. It seems to be, having seen a couple things I can't talk about, $300 sort of netbooks that are actually usable seem to be a thing now. Except they're not netbooks, they're ultra portables, they're laptops, they're like 11, 12-inch screens, but they're processors inside of them that you'd actually want to use. And the price points are looking really interesting. I just wish they were Haswell powered so you get the ridiculous Haswell battery life. But not to take anything away from Tamash, but it's interesting. It's $300, $400 laptops seem to be a thing heading into the holiday shopping season. So yeah. I will be very curious to see where those evolve over time. We should take a moment to thank our sponsor, ProXPN. There is, if you haven't heard, a new ProXPN app for Android in the Google Play Store that supports OpenVPN. You know, which Open is good. If you've been watching the headlines this week with the NSA, the latest NSA revelation, but I'm going to back out of the way and let you talk about ProXPN and why having a VPN is pretty cool if you're living a lifestyle where you travel a lot, especially as Mr. Shrout.
Luxurious? Were you going to say luxurious? Because I don't consider it luxurious most of the time. ProXPN, it's a global VPN. What that does is it allows you to create a private internet connection. It prevents people from spying on you. It prevents people from knowing what you're downloading, where you're at, and it has a lot of other cool features in it as well. Any online application can work with ProXPN, including your browsers, your email, file sharing, IM, all that kind of stuff. It keeps everything you do online hidden from prying eyes, disguising that physical location, and giving you unfettered access to websites and online services, no matter where you are living or traveling to. So it uses a 512-bit encryption tunnel. That's good. Works via OpenVPN or PPTP, your choice on that. You can use it to do things like protect yourself against ISP's 6 strikes rule. You can keep your personal internet usage private at work. You can bypass internet filtering and blocked websites. You can bypass geographical restrictions for internet content and online video with worldwide servers in the US, UK, Asia, and more. So it essentially is making your internet connection region-free, which is an interesting way of looking at it. They have software for Mac and Windows to offer advanced controls, allowing you to select, you know, what ports and programs you want to anonymously route through ProXPN servers. It also works on your iOS or Android device, allowing you to use your data plan or public corporate Wi-Fi with complete privacy. And there's also a new ProXPN app for Android in the Google Play Store that supports OpenVPN. So that's worth checking out as well. They have world-class customer support, and even Steve Gibson gave it a great review on Security Now. So how do you take advantage of this? How can you try it out while also getting a bit of a discount as well? Thanks to us, go to proxpn.com/twit for more information. You can read all about the features and what they offer. And you can sign up there, of course. ProXPN premium accounts are normally $9.95 a month or $74.95 for an entire year. But we have a special offer. If you use the code TWICH, that's TWICH, you can receive 20% off the lifetime of your account. That's less than $5 a month on the yearly plan. If you're not satisfied, you can cancel within 7 days for a full refund. So that URL is proxpn.com/twit. with the offer code TWICH, TWICH, proxpn.com/twit. And we thank ProXPN for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware.
Thank you very much. Got a nice tweet from @ThatSeebGuy, a.k.a. Jason Siebert, Ryan Shrout, @Patrick Norton on Twitch 232 for CPUs for virtualization. Focus on the S series like the 3770S. The VTD bits are enabled. So if you don't know what VTD is for virtualization, go listen to last week's podcast, where you can find at twit.tv/Twitch, where we kind of nerded out on processor choices for people.
I tried. I
think you did a fine job. I'm biased, though.
Maybe a little.
And if you don't like Twitter, which is at Ryan Stroud or at Patrick Norton for us, you can email us, twitch@twit.tv, which brings us to an email from Pat about a classic problem. He is having bent pin issues. He says, I recently bought a Hyper 212 Evo to replace a stock cooler on my FX 8350. When pulling the old cooler off the processor, I decided to come out, When pulling the old cooler off the processor decided to come off with it. Needless to say, I now have a bunch of bent pins. I have them bent all back to their original positions, and it has reinstalled just fine. I'm just wondering, before I turn it on, can it hurt my motherboard if the pins aren't perfect? Thanks for the help. Love the show. Keep up the good work, Pat. From personal experience, if you get all of the pins in all of the slots, none of them are mashed flat and crossing over with other pins in between the processor and the slots, that would be bad. But double and triple check it, maybe have somebody else eyeball it for you. But if all of the pins fit into all of the slots, even if they're bent, they will still work. Do not force it. If it forces it, if you force it, they will bend. And if you really screw up, if you force it, they will bend and you will slip, and then you will mash half the pins flat on the processor. I saw somebody do this once. It was, yeah, that noise that Ryan just made is the sound of watching somebody wipe out a $300 processor and then weep. You know, because the only thing worse than bending back 5 or 6 pins is trying to bend back 100 or 150 pins.
Which I haven't, you know, I've thrown away at least one processor, looking at all the pens that I had done something like that on, and went, nope, no thanks, not gonna work out, not gonna work.
But if all the pins go into all the slots, you will be fine. If you have torn off a pin or forget a pin, that is when the mayhem starts. Do not short circuit the processor. The results are usually not pleasant. So no, you should. It should be fine. Just make sure all the pins fit in all the slots. Just gonna say that one last time.
Yeah, I've actually used if the pins are just like if you've tried to line them up, and it's a very difficult process to get them to line up perfectly again. As long as they fit in there, and then you push the arm down, it actually will straighten out the pins a little bit for you in that process. You'll probably notice if you take it out and look at the pins again, they're actually a little bit straighter than when you actually put it in there. But they do have to make sure they go in all those holes. Otherwise, that's a big problem.
Yeah. Mike's got a question about the IVBE upgrade. He says, I love your show and my weekly routine. Thanks for listening. I originally jumped on board with the LGA 2011 because I was excited at the prospect of being able to upgrade later. I couldn't afford a monster $1,000 part, so I got the very capable 3820, which pound for pound has been a completely kick-ass part. I built around this 3820 instead of the 3770K at the time because of the performance per dollar and the upgrade path. Well, here we are, and the promise of 2011 board is here. Should I put my money where my mouth is and pick up an Ivy Bridge E part and try to sell the 3820? Is it worth it, or should I give in to my thriftier nature? I game at 1080p, use Lightroom and Photoshop, and just about always multitask as much as possible. 16 gigs of RAM, a Corsair 550D case, and a Corsair H100 liquid cooler for moderate overclocking. My first thought is, do you have an SSD? And if you don't, get one. That would be my first thought. Like, if you don't have an SSD, get an SSD. It'll do more for you. I mean, you know, is Photoshop bogging? Is Lightroom bogging? Are you trying to use Photoshop and Lightroom and game at the same time?
I hope not. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I would say you held on to this platform from this long.
Right.
You had the 3820. I would probably say let's go with that mid-tier Ivy Bridge E, the 4930K. Don't buy the $999 part. Buy the $550 part when they start going on sale. You'll get 50% more cores. You'll get a little bit better clock speed, and you could probably sell that 3820 for $150 maybe, or something like that, and get a little bit of that investment back. And then you can tell yourself that the initial investment was worth it. You've taken full advantage of the platform. It's probably not going to go anywhere after this, and you'll have headroom going forward for whatever kind of applications you need. Now, you don't need to do this, of course. 3820 is probably still performing pretty well for you.
Right.
But, you know, I understand our argument of being kind of pigheaded and be like, well, damn it, I bought into this platform, so I'm going all the way, right? I chose this instead of the 3770K. So, a $500 processor is a lot easier to swallow than a $900 and something processor for sure.
Yeah, it is. Or you could wait a few months, but it's the prices might drop a little bit, but would you expect any? Okay.
No, what's funny is when I was writing this Ivy Bridge e-review, one of the things we graph is performance per dollar. So every time we write a new review, I have to go make sure all the prices are up to date. And I bet those Intel processor changes from March to today were maybe like May to today, like $10 at the most on any of them, which is depressing. When I sat there and thought about it, I was like, wow, none of these have changed at all. Even the AMD side, they actually hadn't changed any. So what are you gonna do?
Wait for the next platform to come out. I'm still running a Core i7 920, and my biggest issue in life is getting a GPU upgrade going for that, which would involve me actually getting my Steam account. Yeah, and spending more time gaming instead of playing with my children. We got an email from children like the freaking iPad games.
They do. It's true.
It's just, my wife would kill me if I got my son into first-person shooters. We got an email from Fred about power supply, power consumption. He says, we're having an argument among geek friends here, all things being equal. Does it pull more energy or cost more to run a given computer with a 1,000-watt power supply as opposed to a 550-watt power supply? The assumption is that the 550-watt is plenty for the given computer. Love the show. Keep up the great work, Fred. The power supply is going to supply as much power as the motherboard, GPU, and drives require, ... So if that's, that's going to fluctuate between idle, standby states, such as sleep and hibernation. Not that you use hibernation a lot on a desktop.
Yeah, it should.
Versus full zoot gaming from hell mode when you're running, say, 3, Titans on multiple 4K monitors because you roll with all of the money and all the GPU performance. But generally speaking, you're going to consume with a given motherboard, GPU, and hard drive or SSD or Blu-ray drive or whatever else is attached to it, you're going to use the same amount of wattage at any given moment on a 550-watt power supply as you are on a 1,000-watt power supply. It's not like, it's not like a big block V8 versus a Honda engine, where the Honda engine is going to give you, 300 foot-pounds of torque and 40 miles to the gallon, and the big block is going to give you 300 foot-pounds of torque as long as you keep it around, I'm stretching for analogies here, but essentially they're going to use the same amount of power. The efficiency is going to have more of an impact on how efficiently it creates that power, or creates that power is not the right word. Creates not the right verb, I should say. But
so, yeah, I mean, you're right. It's if there's a difference, it's so minor,
right,
that it's really not even worth being an issue about. The only modern power supplies are so much more efficient than they were 10 years ago,
right,
that a 1,000-watt power supply is able to generate as little power as a 550-watt could at idle. Now, depending on model to model, there may be some variance there, but if you took like the same if you took the same platform, Seasonic 1,000-watt to like 600-watt, there would be basically no difference. It would be as much difference as there would be, model to model of the exact same SKU, right? There's just a little bit of variance and all that kind of stuff with the analog electrical components at work. So no, I don't, if you, I believe their argument probably was, is there a side effect of overbuying on the power supply side? And I would say that probably not, right? It
has more of an impact on your wallet, really, than anywhere else. Not your electrical bill, but wallet impact. But the actual physical, you spend a lot more, or you should be spending a lot more money for a decent 1,000-watt PSU versus a 550-watt. If you have a 5 or 8-year-old 550-watt power supply, it may well behoove you to upgrade that if you're looking for more energy efficiency out of your power supply. But buy the most efficient power supply. You don't need to, you know what I mean? Unless you're like really convinced you're going to buy that multiple Titan configuration in a year.
I did have to do that last week. I had to upgrade the power supply on our system.
Oh wow.
I had a 1,000-watt power supply. We were running triple Titans, and I saw power consumption hit like 955 watts. And I went, hey, I said, hey Ken, will you go get that 1,200-watt power supply out of the closet for me? We need to upgrade this.
That's a pretty serious power supply issue. That said, the vast majority of us
Yes.
are pushing it
Correct.
to need a 750-watt power supply. So
Yeah.
short answer is well, we answered it, so I'm not going to go over it again. Mike's got a thought about a case for the Ripmaster. He says, I just started watching some of the Twitch episodes on Twit. Thank you. And I've seen a number of case reviews, and I think this would be an awesome case for your Ripmaster 3K. I presently have two setups, one running vSphere ESX 5.1 with 4 terabytes of disk, and the other running Windows Home Server 2011 with 20 terabytes of disk. That's awesome. You have more. I only have 12 terabytes, so suddenly I feel profoundly inadequate. He's attached a few images. Believe it or not, these two machines are pulling a combined 475 watts, the power of Seasonic X750 power supplies. Each is running a Supermicro X8 DTL board with two E6020 CPUs, 96 gigabytes of memory for ESX, and an 8 gigabyte restricted, 24 gigabyte installed for Windows Home Server. That's a lot of memory. And it was the Sigmatech Elysium, which is pretty freaking pimpin'.
Actually, let me
12 5.25-inch drive bays. Yes, sir.
Well, hold on. Go ahead. I'm going to find. I think he had a picture in here. I'm going to download and paste in there.
Okay.
Of his actual uses. Oh my gosh, how big is this photo? Maybe
It's
this
big.
will work out very well.
Well, I just like the idea that this may be the 12 external 5.25-inch drive bays, the $170 case. This is the only case I've ever seen that will stuff more 5.25-inch, Blu-ray or DVD drives into it. So that alone, I thank you for. My wife will be upset when I come home with yet another computer case. Waiting for it.
It's not letting me. I don't think it's going to let me.
I think the picture
paste in
actually exceeds what Google Docs will let you drop in.
I tried to drop in a 5 megabyte image. I don't think. I don't think that's going to work. I should have known as soon as I saw it. When you see an image load on a 30 megabit connection where it goes very slowly down, like, yeah, okay, yeah, think about that.
That's also another the Sigmatech copy for the Elysium website. The Sigmatech Super Tower Chassis. Elysium, domicile of the blessed in the Roman Empire, surrounded by own stars and the sun, your new high-end gaming tower. So
you don't see those very often, right? You don't see the super huge tall towers.
No.
Either. I tried again. It didn't work. Sorry, guys.
But they're
no
really awesome if you need all of the 5.25-inch drive bays.
Nice.
Yeah, 12 5.25-inch drive bays, 2 4-in-3 hard disk drive cases, supporting extreme HPTX, XLATX, and downward form factors. So you can fit the ridiculous pizza box size motherboards inside of this, and 12 5.25-inch drive bays.
So do you feel the need to update your Ripmaster?
More than I will say in a public forum because my wife might be listening. No,
secret.
I'm trying to figure out a good way to rip multiple Blu-ray discs simultaneously. There's about 300 that I want to go through as quickly as possible.
Jeez. Yeah.
Well,
okay. You're gonna need some drives.
I do a show called HD Nation for the home theater and HD video enthusiasts. I like me some Blu-rays, especially when they drop down to $8 a couple months after they've been released.
Nice.
It's a bad habit. Plus, when you start storing massive video files from iTunes and Google Play and Amazon Prime, and it's just, I like video. I love movies so much, and entire seasons of television shows on tap. I have storage issues.
All right, it's an addiction.
I like that case though. That's got potential. Thanks for the heads up on that, Mike. Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address if you want to send us a question, give us a heads up. chastise us for not getting more excited and enthused or terrified by the latest in a long and unending stream of NSA revelations. Bruce Schneier, by the way, has a really good write-up on that. If you are panicked about the fact that everything apparently either has a backdoor or the ability to be cracked, although the cracks, I think, in many cases are overstated by an incredibly overdramatic New York Times article. You're going to be obviously reporting from the Intel Developer Forum next week, no?
Yes, next week is the Intel Developer Forum. That is the annual summit of all Intel-based nerds or Intel fans out at the San Francisco Convention Center area. It'll be interesting to see what we talk about, right? Because there's no new desktop architecture to talk about. We'll probably talk about their smaller form factor SoCs that will be coming out later this year. So there will still be some interesting stuff there. Think not high end, think low end, low form factor, small form factor designs, right? This is where they're going to try to compete against ARM and show what they can actually do in these different areas. So it'll still be interesting, and all the Intel partners will be there. AMD will be there, NVIDIA will be there, writing coattails and figuring out what they can talk about as well. So that's going to be our focus next week. I leave this weekend, so I'll be out there all week, and yeah, maybe I'll be able to make it up to Petaluma next week too.
That would be cool. Keep us posted. And of course, the Apple announcement on the 10th, which we expect to have the iPhone 5S, including the now online legend, the golden iPhone, the iPhones 5C, which will be the candy-colored iPhones, and potentially a new Apple TV announcement, and possibly the unveiling of the next generation, or a more detailed unveiling of the next generation Apple desktop. And we wait with bated breath. It's going to be an interesting week next week. There's a lot going on. Yep. But yeah, Apple's down in Cupertino. It'll be interesting to see who's at IDF and who's down in Cupertino for the Apple announcement on that day. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly television show on, well, computer hardware. We love your questions. Keep sending them in. And if you've been looking for more of the shows, just go to twit.tv/Twitch. You can find every single episode ever made of the show. We highly recommend you download each one and then subscribe to ProXPN, our sponsor, so that we can keep bringing the shows to you.
Absolutely.
And yeah, exciting week next week. It's going to be interesting to watch IDF and Apple's announcement. If for no other reason, to watch Twitter explode once again. With a little bit of luck, we'll have actually Darren from Hack5 on to talk about what's going on with encryption or the lack thereof on the internet. That'll be a fun one. And I soaked one of the IOSafe N2 NAS drives, or NAS enclosures. Yeah. Oh my goodness. One, I just want to say Synology makes a ripping freaking awesome NAS. Alan was completely nailed that one heads on. It is a really nice piece of machinery. The transfers over the gigabit switch were just ridiculously fast compared to what I'm used to. And yes, you can soak that thing underwater for an extraordinarily long period of time and then pull the drives out and reuse them with your data protected. So that was a fun one. There's nothing quite like pulling $600-700 worth of hardware out of a bucket of water, and just sit there with the water flowing out and then drying it off so you could pull it apart. That was a little uptight. Like, oh my goodness, I just drowned this like $900 worth of hardware. Oh my goodness. But it worked. So props to IOSafe. Yep. It's all for television and science. Telescience. Coming next from PC Per. That's it for this edition of Twitch. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.